In 2 ABY, Cinnabar's Infonet reported that the Grand Admiral had been recalled to Coruscant after several years commanding an armada in border systems on the Outer Rim, presumably a cover for his true mission to the unknown regions. The Newsnet also identified him as a Grand Admiral, although his promotion was not believed to be public knowledge. After his return, Thrawn attended the official commissioning ceremony for the Superstar Destroyer Executor at the Imperial Transfer Post near the Quat system. Back on Coruscant, Thrawn was invited to join the elite order of the Canted Circle on Emperor Palpatine's behest and in recognition of his recent successes. The invitation surprised many due to Thrawn's alien origins, and particularly Grand Admiral Rufan Tigalinus, who saw Thrawn's return as a threat to the powerful faction he had assembled within the Imperial Court. Nevertheless, he was inducted into the Order in a ceremony at the Sky Dome Botanical Gardens. That same year, Thrawn became intrigued by a reference to Mayaki, a world which had been inhabited for 3 centuries, yet left largely untouched by the Galactic Republic and the Jedi. When his original assumption that it was a frontier world of little interest proved incorrect, Thrawn investigated further, eventually learning that the indigenous Ysalamiri had the ability to repel the Force using a Force-neutral bubble. Thrawn kept the discovery in mind until he found a use for the creatures several years later. Before Thrawn returned to the unknown regions, he assisted Lord Vader in his campaign against Prince Xizor and Black Sun. The Supreme Commander perceived the Underlord as a threat, but since Emperor Palpatine had an arrangement with the Falline crime boss to let the Syndicate operate without Imperial interference, was unable to eliminate him directly. Instead, he sought a means of distracting his rival. The Grand Admiral agreed to provide such a distraction and at the same time to determine the location of a rebel stronghold. In exchange for the services he humbly provided yet again, Lord Vader agreed to give Thrawn command of the Noghri. The Supreme Commander had once come to the aid of the Noghri, whose homeworld was devastated by a nearby space battle. In exchange for the Empire's help in repairing the damage to their world, the Noghri had pledged their allegiance to the Empire, acting as private commandos for the reigning Dark Lords of the Sith, Palpatine, and Vader. Thrawn's target would be Zekathyne, the Vigo in charge of Black Sun's operation on Corellia, knowing that either a major Imperial attack or the use of the Supreme Commander's mercenary connections would draw Prince Xizor's suspicion to Lord Vader. Thrawn decided to use a small attack by the local garrison that could not be traced to his senior. However, he would need to provide just cause for such an attack. He therefore anonymously alerted Colonel Maximilian Veers that a rebel force was gathering in the forest near Thyne's fortress. All that remained was to ensure that Thyne's forces opened fire, thereby providing an excuse for the Imperials to storm the fortress. Unwilling to trust the assignment to anybody else, Thrawn decided to infiltrate Thyne's fortress in person, disguised in the Mandalorian armor of the bounty hunter Jodo Kast. As well as providing cause for the Imperial attack, Thrawn would personally eliminate Thyne. However, even as Kast, Thrawn needed a rationale for his visit to the fortress. To this end, he had the Admonitor intercept the freighter Hopskip and the crew taken before Captain Nerys. Thrawn intended to present the group to Thyne as assassins sent to kill him, thereby earning his trust. Nerys, however, told them that he needed a civilian ship to transport a cargo of 200 slate boxes to Corellia and intended to hold their current cargo until they completed the delivery. With little choice, the Hopskip's crew agreed to make the delivery and were introduced to Thrawn, already disguised as Kast, who Nerys explained would accompany them on the delivery. The group traveled to Coronet City, where Thrawn directed them to a curio shop in Treasure Ship Row for instructions on how to make contact with Borba Krisk, the cargo's apparent recipient and a rival of Thyne's. They soon returned, having been informed by the shop's owner Sash that he didn't know how to contact Krisk, but that they should speak to the owner of the adjacent shop when he returned that evening. As Thrawn led the group away from the shop, they oversaw a disturbance at a nearby tap cafe where a group of Bromstad mercenaries were harassing the owner. Despite Thrawn's objections, Ree Winwood and Ratha Palror decided to intervene. Thrawn casually pulled up a seat and watched the ensuing fight. Only when the mercenaries produced weapons did he act, shooting the holster of one mercenary and telling the group to leave. By this time, the rest of Thrawn's group, Habertrell and Moran Darmic, had arrived and pulled their weapons, as had two other onlookers, Hal and Corran Horn. Seeing that they were outnumbered, the mercenaries left. The newcomers introduced themselves and explained that they were seeking jobs with Krisk, and having overheard Trell talking about him, were hoping to accompany the group to make contact with him. However, Thrawn quickly realized that the two were undercover Corsec agents looking to arrest Thine, and decided to modify his plans to ensure that they were the ones to deal with the crime lord, further serving to exonerate Vader. Therefore, Thrawn agreed to let Hal accompany Trell and Palra to the shop that evening. While Thrawn went to the meeting to act as a rearguard, Corran would accompany Winwood and Darmic to load the Hopskip's cargo onto the ship's land speeder. Thrawn was actually well aware that Sarge worked for Zekathine, and that news of a group looking for one of his rivals would have reached the crime lord. The Grand Admiral looked on as Horn, Trell, and Palror walked into a trap and were taken to Thine's fortress before returning to the Hopskip. He explained that he had been heavily outnumbered and unable to prevent their capture, but while the others delivered the cargo to a new meeting with Krisk, he intended to infiltrate the fortress and secure their release. After Horn persuaded Thrawn to let him accompany him, Thrawn left once more to acquire a land speeder. In his absence, Corran suggested that they find out what was in the slate boxes. The group looked for any that weren't properly sealed, opening two to discover a low-grade spice compound and some Durine Fire gems. Resealing the boxes, Horn instructed the others to take only those two to Krisk and hide the rest in the Dewback storage warehouse outside Coronet City. If he and Cast failed to return, they could use them as leverage to make Krisk mount a rescue or ransom the prisoners from Thine. What none of them realized was that Thrawn had left the two boxes improperly sealed so that they might discover the contents, and that all the remaining boxes were empty. After Thrawn returned with an X-34 land speeder, he and Horn set off for Thine's fortress. On the way, Thrawn caught Horn glancing towards the Dewback storage warehouse and, realizing that they must have opened the slate boxes, concluded that they were being taken to the facility. Upon arriving near the fortress, the two were met by a pair of guards who escorted them to Thine's office, where the crime lord was interrogating the prisoners. It was then that Thrawn revealed his deception, pulling a blaster on Horn and explaining that he, along with the others, had been sent by Krisk to kill Thine. Their accomplices, he informed the crime lord, would be meeting with Krisk at the Minex Haven Cantina to finalize their payment, which would then be delivered to the Dewback storage yard. The deception was intended to lure some of Thine's men away from the fortress before the Imperial attack, and paid off when Thine agreed to send his minions to both locations. Until Cast's story was verified, the prisoners would be held in the fortress's wine cellar, and Thrawn, along with 3 of Thine's men, locked the prisoners in the cellar. However, Thrawn was able to slip Corran Horn a molecular stiletto and subtly told the Horns to find him after using it to escape. Thrawn and the guards returned to Thine's office, where the presence of Imperial troops outside had just come to the crime lord's attention. After the Horns escaped and told the others to flee the fortress, they made their way to Thine's office, having now realized that Cast was working against Thine. The fortress's security system detected their approach, and Thine mistook them for Imperial stormtroopers who had already infiltrated the fortress. Thrawn suggested that the two Bromstad mercenary guards take positions on either side of the door to cut down the intruders in a crossfire. However, his true intention was to place them both in his line of fire. When the horns broke through the door, Thrawn fired on the one guard while Corran Horn stunned the other. Seeing the situation turn against him, Thine fled down an escape tunnel, pursued by the Corsec agents, while Thrawn remained in the fortress to complete his mission. Thine was soon apprehended, and the Horns rendezvoused with Colonel Veers outside the fortress. Meanwhile, the Imperials had found no evidence of rebel activity, and still having no reason to enter the fortress, a standoff had developed. Thrawn moved to a position where he could fire on the Imperials outside, and since the shot appeared to have come from Thine's forces, Veers gave the order for the stormtroopers to commence their attack on the fortress. Thrawn remained to observe the battle long enough to ensure that Trell and Palror escaped before likewise fleeing the fortress. While Trell and Palror rescued their associates at the Minix Haven, Thrawn returned to the hopskip and left a data card congratulating the crew and telling them to return to the Admonitor to collect their cargo. After making his way back to the Admonitor 6 hours later than intended, but having completed his objectives, Thrawn was visited by Lord Vader. The Supreme Commander was pleased with the outcome of the mission, but one thing remained. The hopskip had not been chosen at random, but rather because it was smuggling blasters to the Rebel Alliance. While the crew had been away, Nerys had ensured that homing beacons were secured amongst the cargo. As the hopskip departed after retrieving its cargo, the Imperials traced its hyperspace vector and determined that it was bound for the Shibrik system, though Thrawn suspected it would ultimately head for the Dera system. True to his word, Lord Vader later brought Thrawn to Honoghr, where the Supreme Commander explained that his duties in the war against the Empire's enemies required his full attention and named his accompanying underling as his heir. The news was initially greeted with sadness by the Noghri, for whom Lord Vader had provided hope and a purpose, but they continued their loyal service to their new master and, in time, came to find these things in Thrawn's leadership. Thrawn initially made little use of the Noghri, as they were not required for his mission to the unknown regions, but hoped to make greater use of them upon his eventual long-term return to the Empire. One of Thrawn's earliest Noghri recruits was Rukh, who impressed the Grand Admiral by not appearing intimidated by the Empire's technology. Thrawn would eventually choose Rukh to serve as his bodyguard, and the Noghri would rarely stray far from his master thereafter. Thereafter, Thrawn developed a plan to uncover the location of the Rebel Alliance's newest base. The Empire would disrupt the Alliance's supply network by displacing or capturing the free traders and smugglers who ran most of the Alliance's cargo. Tracking and interrogating smugglers would uncover Rebel bases, including, it was hoped, the Alliance fleet. Lord Vader led a personal task force, Death Squadron, aboard his flagship Executor, moving from Centaurus down the Trielis trade route, obliterating shadow ports and smugglers' nests. Imperial slicers and strategists pored over interrogation transcripts, hints, and rumors, with Thrawn's ability to discern patterns proving vital in sifting through the evidence. A battle in the Alcantha asteroids tipped Death Squadron off to a Rebel-affiliated Sakiyan smuggling ring operating out of the Sivris Shadowport. Death Squadron obliterated Sivris, destroying the Sakiyan ring, which operated from Corellia all the way to Terminus. Meanwhile, as Thrawn had suspected, the hopskip had indeed been bound for the Dera system, specifically to a Rebel stronghold on Dera than Forth. Before returning to the unknown regions, and shortly before the Battle of Hoth in 3 ABY, the Grand Admiral worked with the Supreme Commander in planning an Imperial strike on Deratham IV. Though it was the Chiss who devised the strategy, Lord Vader presented it to the pilots of the 181st Imperial Fighter Group, while Thrawn stood to the side as his main subordinate. The Battle of Yavin saw the destruction of a critical Rebel supply convoy, whose cargo had been ticketed for Echo Base on the planet Hoth. The Yavin convoy did not uncover Echo Base's location, but gave Death Squadron enough of a lead to blanket the western reaches of the Outer Rim territories with probe droids. One probe finally uncovered the Rebel base on Hoth, which Death Squadron promptly overran in a massive ground assault. Yavin was thus a resounding tactical and strategic victory both for the Empire and Thrawn's planning, and several pilots from the 181st were hailed as heroes. The battle saw promotions for Eva Derricott, Soontir Fel, and Tur Fenrir, but Thrawn, the architect of the victory, went uncredited. Thrawn would again return to the Empire shortly after its victory at Hoth scattered the Rebel alliance throughout the Outer Rim territories. Palpatine sought to capitalize on their momentum by calling for the Imperial Navy to complete the destruction of the alliance. To this end, while Emperor Palpatine addressed naval commanders on Coruscant, Thrawn joined a fleet under the command of Lord Vader in an assault on a Rebel space station near a planet in the Outer Rim. On his superior signal, the Chiss officer launched his TIE squadrons, and catching the rebels unprepared, the Imperial forces soon destroyed the base and the fleeing Rebel starfighters. Shortly after, Thrawn received an envoy from the Emperor who briefed him on the growing pirate activity in the Pakuni system. Thrawn was tasked with eliminating the pirates and establishing a permanent Imperial presence in the system to ensure the safety of nearby trade routes. Thrawn, aboard the Victory-class Star Destroyer Stalwart, traveled to a cargo area near Argoon to retrieve the material needed for the construction of a new Imperial space station. Finding the base abandoned, the Imperials suspected an imminent Rebel attack, and sure enough, Rebel forces soon arrived. However, Thrawn launched TIEs to cover the loading operation, and the rebels were quickly defeated. Thrawn gave the task of pacifying the system to Commander Buckeye of the Nebulon B-2 frigate Ludwig, holding the Stalwart ready until needed. Buckeye proceeded to the Pakuni system and quickly destroyed the pirate base. With the pirates' main staging area neutralized, Thrawn took the Stalwart to the system, escorting the convoy carrying the equipment for the new installation. The system, however, was not yet pacified, and Thrawn's convoy arrived during a combined attack from pirate and rebel forces. Although the Ludwig took major damage, the remaining enemy forces fled upon the arrival of the Stalwart and its convoy. Work on the station NL-1 proceeded quickly, and Thrawn left the Ludwig to oversee construction. The rebels made an attempt to prevent the station's completion, but were defeated by the Ludwig and its fighters before Thrawn returned in the Stalwart. The station sustained minor damage in the attack, but repairs proceeded quickly and it was soon almost operational. Despite all the Ludwig's TIE fighters and TIE interceptors being repaired and refurbished, Thrawn was eager to inspect the new facility and ensure it would suit the Emperor's purposes, forcing the Ludwig to deploy TIE bombers as a defensive shield. Thrawn left the Stalwart in a Delta-class DX-9 stormtrooper transport and headed to the station, but soon became the target of a Rebel starfighter attack. His bomber escorts made short work of the rebels and was able to land on the station to conduct his inspection. After approving of the construction effort, Thrawn returned to the Stalwart, again coming under attack, this time from pirate shuttles. After returning safely due to the efforts of his escorts, Thrawn sent his personal compliments to the pilots for their ability to improvise in using the TIE bomber in a defensive role. Thrawn kept the Stalwart nearby during the final stages of NL-1's construction, leaving briefly to oversee the delivery of 2 IPV-1 system patrol craft and again to escort the final convoy to the station, an Imperial relief force. The rebels made one final attempt to destroy the station, but were again defeated, and the stalwart returned with the relief force to find the battle almost over. With the station fully staffed, Thrawn remained to oversee repairs from the final rebel attack before his forces were relieved. Thrawn later found himself facing his former student from the Imperial Academy, Tyber Zann, who had created a powerful crime syndicate. During the Imperial occupation of the planet Bespin, the Zann Consortium raided the planet and stole large quantities of Tibanna gas. Zann planted evidences in the computer systems pointing to Black Sun. This affair increased tensions between Lord Vader and Prince Jizor, but Grand Admiral Thrawn suspected a manipulation. Soon after the crime boss's death at the hands of the Supreme Commander's forces, Thrawn traveled to the Carida system to retrieve a Sith holocron from Tyber Zann. However, Zann expected a trap and brought a fleet with him. Thrawn was able to surprise Zann by firing a hidden hypervelocity gun at his ships. The battle ended with one of Zann's bounty hunters, the Trandoshan Bosk, stealing the holocron and bringing it to the Grand Admiral. The Admonitor then fled the system with the valuable artifact and left his fleet behind to finish Zann and his forces off. However, Tyber and his fleet managed to destroy Thrawn's forces thanks to the use of the newest Aggressor-class Star Destroyers. Zann escaped, knowing that his Lieutenant Uri Fen had placed a homing device on the holocron, which he later used to lead him to one of the Emperor's storehouses on Coruscant. The Empire found itself in a period of instability for the Empire following a defection to the Rebel Alliance. Though the treacherous Admiral Harkov was swiftly brought to justice, while Lord Vader was tracking down the remnants of his fleet, Grand Admiral Demetrius Zarin, head of new starfighter technology, launched a coup d'etat against the Emperor. Crippling Vader's Star Destroyer, Zarin moved to Coruscant in his flagship, the Glory, and attempted to abduct Palpatine. Vader followed, flying a new TIE-D Defender, ironically designed under Zarin's supervision, in a group led by Colonel Marek Steely. Thrawn too rushed to the Emperor's aid in the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Vanguard. Zarin caused severe damage to the Emperor's Star Destroyer. Majestic and his forces boarded the ship and escaped with Palpatine aboard an escort shuttle. By the time Thrawn arrived, Steele had successfully disabled Palpatine's shuttle, and the assassin-class corvette Mescu was conducting a rescue operation. Thrawn launched the Vanguard's TIE bombers to assist the battle against Zarin's forces, but when the Emperor was safely aboard the Mescu, the Glory fled to hyperspace with the Vanguard in pursuit. Though Zarin eluded the Vanguard, Thrawn, having transferred his flag to the Victory-class Star Destroyer Sheltor, put the ship on red alert. Zarin's coup put the Empire on the defensive, and using his knowledge of their facilities, Zarin began a campaign to weaken the Empire's starfighter manufacturing capabilities while simultaneously attempting to gather supplies to begin his own TIE Advanced and TIE Defender production. After losing several facilities to Zarin's attacks, Thrawn was charged with preventing Zarin from inflicting any further damage to Imperial facilities. Although 3 facilities in the Omar system were destroyed by Zarin, Imperial forces were able to secure Deep Space Manufacturing Facility ZA-13. However, Rebel forces, attempting to take advantage of the Zarin situation, attacked the facility. Although the attack was defeated, the Rebels' use of new magnetic pulse warheads led Imperial intelligence to begin a search for their base of operations. After the search revealed the Rebel station RS-32, an attack was soon planned. TIE defenders would be sent in first to disable the station and eliminate enemy fighters. Once the station was disabled, boarding craft would deliver troops to capture it, after which Thrawn would arrive on the Sheltor to retrieve the fighters and the magnetic pulse warheads for use in the developing arms race against Zarin. The operation went well, and by the time Thrawn arrived, only a handful of rebel fighters remained. However, an information leak allowed Zarin to strike. While the Sheltor moved against RS-32, Zarin's forces attacked and destroyed ZA-13. Furthermore, Zarin attempted to ambush Thrawn near RS-32, dispatching the Immobilizer 418 cruiser grappler to prevent his escape, while the Nebulon B-2 frigate Shadow and strike-class medium cruiser Serpent attacked the Sheltor. With reinforcements unable to arrive in time, Thrawn was forced to make the most of what was available. With only 3 TIE bombers available, Thrawn held them in reserve, first launching the Sheltor's 2 operational TIE defenders, armed with magnetic pulse warheads, to disable the weapon systems on the grappler, while the ship's single TIE advanced, fought enemy fighters. Marek Stele, flying one of the TIE defenders, quickly delivered a magnetic pulse warhead to the grappler, as well as the 2 attacking capital ships. Thrawn launched his TIE bombers, which moved against the grappler, while Staley held off enemy fighters. Eventually, the grappler was destroyed, and though the Sheltor sustained damage during the battle, Thrawn was able to escape to hyperspace. The loss of ZA-13 left the Empire without most of its ability to produce TIE advanced fighters. The Emperor wanted retribution against Zarin and commanded Thrawn to track him down and destroy his forces. Emperor Palpatine officially promoted Thrawn to Admiral and made the best resources in the Imperial Navy available to him, among them Marek Stele, who had greatly impressed Thrawn. Zarin, meanwhile, moved his forces to the Outer Rim to prepare for further attacks against the Empire. Sometime later, Zarin's forces began looting the facility where he oversaw development of the TI Defender. Imperial forces were able to briefly regain control of the space station, but a subsequent attack by Zarin forced them to evacuate. 3 TIE Defenders were loaded onto the BFF-1 bulk freighter Mahasup, while the key members of the design team fled in the shuttle Genab-Geeb. The unarmed freighter soon transferred its cargo to Corvette Group Hashim, who were under instructions to deliver them to Thrawn, who, on orders from Palpatine, was to see them to a secret location on Coruscant for safekeeping. The journey, however, proved hazardous with multiple attacks from Zarin, rebel, and pirate forces. Although the convoy's escorts were able to eliminate the rebel and treacherous Imperial forces, Reniki pirates were able to use the distraction to capture the scientists and data from the Genab-Geeb, while Nami pirates captured one of the corvettes, both of which presented the risk of the proliferation of TI Defender technology. The attacks also forced the remaining prototypes to be moved once more, this time to cargo ferry group Mesan. Mesan Group finally reached Thrawn and transferred the prototypes to his Star Destroyer. Thrawn took them directly to Coruscant. Since being charged with eliminating Zarin, Thrawn had studied the former Grand Admiral's strategy and had found a weakness in his dependence on technology. Working with Cygnus Spaceworks, Thrawn began secretly developing the missile boat as a countermeasure to the TIE Defender. Thrawn believed that the Empire's latest starfighter would provide them with the technological advantage needed to defeat Zarin and prevent TIE Defender technology from spreading to other factions. Meanwhile, the Niki attempted to ransom the lead TIE Defender scientist. The Empire, as the highest bidders, met with the Niki representatives to make the exchange, but planned a double cross. The interdictor Red Claw would prevent the Reniki from escaping, while Imperial forces recovered both the scientist and ransom money. Thrawn suspected that the Nami may attempt to interfere with the exchange in an effort to capture the scientists themselves. He therefore gave the Red Claw instructions to capture a Nami ships and take the pirate leader into custody. Thrawn's suspicion was proved correct, but though a Nami vessel was captured during the exchange, Tarek was not aboard. Furthermore, the unsuccessful Nami attack did leave the Red Claw damaged and stranded in the system pending hyperdrive repairs, and in a subsequent attack, Zarin was able to capture the scientist. The situation deteriorated further with the news that Tarek's forces were attacking an Imperial cargo transfer area in the Yurna system. The Nami were using TIE defenders in the attack, which was being observed by the Alliance, indicating that not only had they managed to begin production of the fighters, but were negotiating to supply them to the rebels. Thrawn was determined to prevent TIE defenders from falling into rebel hands, so planned an assault on a Nami strike cruiser delivering a shipment of the fighters. The attack on the Nuance saw the debut of the newly completed missile boat, escorting assault gunboats while they disabled the strike cruiser. With the Nuance disabled, Thrawn arrived in his new flagship, the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Grey Wolf, to oversee its capture along with its cargo, simultaneously depriving the rebels of the TIE defenders while boosting the Empire's own supply. Along with 8 TIE defenders, the attack resulted in the capture of several prisoners and led the Empire to the location of Tarek's TIE defender manufacturing facility. Before Thrawn could attack, however, the rebels attempted to retrieve the TIE defenders. Thrawn decided to make a stand and defeat the coming attack on the Grey Wolf. Thrawn led the attack against 3 Carrack-class light cruisers, while Staley, flying a missile boat, intercepted proton torpedoes headed for the Grey Wolf. Even so, the rebel bombers succeeded in taking out the Grey Wolf's shields before the rebel assault was ultimately defeated, ensuring that they would not acquire TIE defenders. With no time to waste, Thrawn recalled the Imperial fighters and took the Grey Wolf to engage Tarek's manufacturing facility. Thrawn sought the destruction of the facility, but also intended to capture Ali Tarek. The pirate leader reminded him of himself, and he had convinced Palpatine to offer her the chance to serve the Empire. The factory was protected by numerous starfighters, which moved to engage the Grey Wolf. Thrawn launched TIE interceptors to engage incoming fighters, while Steely's missile boat cleared the way for a TIE bomber attack on the factory. As Tarek fled the doomed facility, her transport was disabled, and the Nami was taken into custody for delivery to Palpatine. The destruction of the Nami facility left Zarin's forces as the only other faction in possession of the TIE defender. Thrawn, however, was convinced that the missile boat would prove decisive. Thrawn was soon called to meet with the Emperor on Coruscant. Palpatine was pleased with Thrawn's performance during the Nami crisis and his continued loyalty to the Empire. He therefore decided to make his promotion to Grand Admiral official, with Thrawn formally taking Zarin's place among the 12. The New Order's prejudice against aliens was well known, and Thrawn was the only non-human to ever achieve the rank. Now, with the Nami threat eliminated, Emperor Palpatine ordered Thrawn to resume his hunt for the renegade Imperial and bring about the destruction of Zarin's forces.